Welcome into the channel. Let's talk some Texans. I'm Cody Stoots. Messy pockets and how CJ Stroud avoids them or really lives and thrives in them. That's what we're talking about today. Bobby Slowik and DeMeco Ryans weighed in on the messy pockets that their rookie quarterback is going to face over the course of the season. And I'll tell you why it's important Stroud learns to handle those messy pockets now and how important that part is to his development. Would love a subscription down below here to the YouTube page. Would also love for you to check out Houston Football, my website where I do all my writing about the Houston Texans, www.houfootball.com. There's also a link down in the description as well. Subscribers to Houston Football get my observations from practice sent right to their emails. Let's talk about these messy pockets and what CJ Stroud has to do to deal with them and ultimately learn to thrive in them. And this messy pocket conversation pops up after listening to Bobby Slowik at the podium earlier this week. And I thought this was a poignant piece of information from Slowik that really stood out to me in the entire conversation, the time that he was at the podium. And Bobby Slowik was asked, hey, you've worked with some really good coaches and you've been around the league here for this many years. What have you learned? What is something that you've taken from those coaches? And listen to what the Texans' first-year offensive coordinator had to say.
Yeah, I would say the top thing, and again, I've referenced this before, the top thing that's different in the NFL compared to college is how messy the pocket gets. So your starting point for handling that, for me, took a while to understand, okay, do we just tell them to move? Or how exactly do you coach that? And it really is what hammered in the importance of footwork to me. I would say that's the number one thing for a young quarterback, and there's a lot. There's a lot that's going on, obviously. That position demands a lot. But being able to trust your footwork and trust your mindset and what you're seeing enables you to react to really all the chaos that winds up going on around you at that position. Once you start feeling that, that's when things start clicking.
So CJ Stroud and the messy pockets that I'll have to deal with. It's worth noting that part of the scout on CJ Stroud and one of the conversations about Stroud, and Slowik talked about it there, how you combat some of those messy pockets that the offensive line just gives you because they've been pushed back or that's where the play is taking you. Footwork was a big positive for CJ Stroud in the draft process. That was something that was a thumbs up for Stroud in the evaluation of his game and the jump from college to the pros. And I feel like he's faced quite a few messy pockets. In fact, more messy pockets than I would have liked for him to have seen, considering this offensive line is like $250 million invested in this offensive line between Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard and Shaq Mason and Kenyon Green and now Juice Scruggs, as he's going to take over a lot more of those center opportunities because of the injury to Scott Quessenberry. So that was an important thing that kind of stuck out to me from what Bobby Slowik had to say. He said that's one of the biggest things he's taken away from his time with other coaches. And you got to think Bobby Slowik has been on coaching staffs under Kyle Shanahan with Sean McVay in Washington. He's been under Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco with Mike McDaniel. And those guys are all head coaches. Mike McDaniel's in Miami. Obviously, Shanahan's in San Francisco. And Sean McVay is a Super Bowl winning coach for the LA Rams. And oh, by the way, when Slowik got his first job in the NFL, it was for Mike Shanahan. So there's a lot of good offense that Bobby Slowik has been around. And, hey, what have you taken from those coaches? And it's like, hey, taking those coaches, getting those young quarterbacks ready with the teachings that they gave me, we got to make sure that their footwork's good. We got to make sure that they learn how to handle a messy pocket. Now, I thought that DeMeco Ryans expanded on the messy pocket conversation. I asked him, hey, messy pockets, how important is that for the defense to create it? And how important is it for Stroud to get some of those opportunities against a unsettled pocket behind his offensive line?
We want to make it as hard as possible on the quarterbacks. We want to disrupt the quarterback's process as much as possible, and that involves having a messy pocket, right? It involves the defensive line being aggressive in how they rushing together. And when it comes to our offense, it's about them being under pressure, being under duress, and can you make the proper decisions, whether it's to make a big play or whether it's to, hey, let's move on. They got us. Let's get out. Let's not turn a bad play into a horrible play. Let's just get out of the play and play the next down.
Let's not turn a bad play into a horrible play. I feel like that was on display Thursday in practice. And really, hey, get out of there. Don't take a sack. Don't make a big mistake that's going to cost the team. On Thursday, there was a very specific play from C.J. Stroud that showcased dealing with some of the plays just falling apart, the offensive line not blocking well enough, and just trying to get rid of the ball and do right by it. And it was a play where the ball just kind of fluttered incomplete to nowhere as the offensive line sort of collapsed and the defense started to get to C.J. Stroud. So he gets to the sideline, and Andrew Beck, who was the target that Stroud looks like was supposed to hit if there was pressure, came over and he explained, it looked like to C.J. Stroud that, hey, I was ready for the ball. You probably should have hit me quick. And then Gerard Johnson, the quarterback coach, came over there and talked to C.J. Stroud. And then Bobby Slowik came over and talked to C.J. Stroud. And then Case Keenum, who was standing behind C.J. Stroud, he started talking to C.J. Stroud. And so it really hammered home, hey, you made the right decision. You just maybe didn't make it fast enough to get the ball out to Beck because that pocket was sort of collapsing around C.J. Stroud. Now, handling some of that pressure, handling the messy pockets is one of the key elements to C.J. Stroud's development. And here's why I believe that. There's two big reasons. One, he didn't face a lot of that in college. There weren't a lot of people getting to C.J. Stroud in college and making him uncomfortable. It's part of the reason he never had to run. It's part of the reason he could take so much time to make decisions is because he has a world-class offensive line blocking for him when he's playing at Ohio State. And so he didn't face a lot of messiness at Ohio State, which allowed him to hit a lot of his wide receivers, which allowed him to make big plays, which also allowed him to read defenses and take a little extra beat or an extra second that maybe he's not going to have in the NFL. So it's really important that he gets used to the fact that the NFL is a lot faster. Troy Aikman's famous comments about no one's ever open. You got to throw them open. And you have to also think about the fact that not only did he have an all-world offensive line, he had an all-world wide receiving core that he worked with for the 2 seasons that he was the starter at Ohio State. Those guys got open, okay? He does not have an all-world wide receiver core in Houston. He's got some potential. He's got some guys that if they play really well in a year or two, they could be big-time players here in the league. They could be factors. They could be guys that Stroud can trust. But he's got to build into and pour into the fact that he's not going to have a bunch of clean pockets like he did at Ohio State. He also doesn't have the talent around him, especially on the offensive line, compared to the defensive lines that he had at Ohio State. Because, look, there's a lot of talent on this offensive line. They've got the highest paid left tackle in football. They got one of the highest paid right tackles in football. They got the 11th, I think, highest paid right guard in football. And they got a first-round pick at left guard and a second-round pick at center. Not to say there's no talent there on the offensive line. There is. But the gap between the Texans' offensive line and the defensive lines they're going to face is not nearly as big, if it is big at all, as the Ohio State versus everybody else gap that C.J. Stroud has to deal with. So that's the big first element is it's a different type of game. It's a big jump. Hey, no, duh, it's college versus the NFL, but he's got to get that out of his mind. The second aspect of that is the 2 spots on the offensive line for the Houston Texans that are the most unsettled, to me, are the center and the left guard spot, and that's where a lot of that pressure shows up front, and because that pressure shows up front, up the middle, that can create a messy pocket faster than just about anything else, because if guys are coming off the edge and they're beating guys wide at the tackle spot, you got the opportunity to step up. But if Juice Scruggs and Kenyon Green aren't good enough on the offensive line, then C.J. Stroud is going to have to deal with some of those messy pockets, and he's going to have to deal with them on a far more regular basis. So it's a talent step up from a defensive perspective. It closes the gap with his talented offensive line, and this offensive line is unsettled where they could create defenses, can create messy pockets the best. And you think about 2 of the first 4 opponents that C.J. Stroud has got to face. He starts with the Baltimore Ravens, which was a team that was in the playoffs. And last year, if their backup quarterback had operated a tad bit differently, they might have beat Joe Burrow and the Bengals in the playoffs. That's a fantastic defense that C.J. Stroud's got to face in week 1. And then week 4, the Pittsburgh Steelers are in town. That's another really tough defense that Stroud is going to have to face and have some success against. So the getting used to traffic around him, getting used to what he needs to do with the ball in a quick manner, make a quick decision. And there was actually some of that in Thursday's practice where some of that pass rush that had been getting home wasn't getting home anymore because the quick game was active. It was running backs. It was slants. It was making a quick decision with the football, and Stroud showcased that. Another element of things getting busy in the protection of C.J. Stroud, and I've seen him do this at training camp a couple of times, he's got the ability to sort of contort and twist and throw from some very unique platforms. Now, he hadn't showcased it a ton, but I can vividly remember a play where there was a lot of pressure to his left, and it looked like it maybe had taken his throwing lane away, and he kind of stayed put in the pocket and just sort of leaned back and hit a pass to a wide receiver out on the left side, and he just kind of leaned around the pressure and made a play. And here's another big element of Stroud's handling of this. He's got legs. He showcased it in the Georgia game. He showcased it a couple of times in training camp so far. It's not going to be a designed element. It's going to be far closer to Patrick Mahomes, where Mahomes runs the football when it's a bit of an emergency, than it is going to be, hey, designed runs, let's take off with the ball, zone read. Not to say that it can't be a weapon, but it's going to be closer to break glass in case of emergency than make it an everyday weapon in C.J. Stroud's tool belt. In fact, on Thursday's practice, he ran for 19 yards. He scampered for 19 yards in one of those plays where he broke away. And it was one of those situations where the offensive line kind of got messy. He saw the hole. He kind of scanned the field a little bit to see what was there. Because it's one thing to get past the offensive line. Well, if you get 2 yards and the linebackers tackle you, then who cares if you got past the offensive line? Now, he took it, and he took a little direct beeline towards the sideline, which is good. He also had one play where he scrambled, got a few yards, slid down, to get the play going and kept the offense moving in one of the situational aspects. So the messy pockets is something that is going to be important for C.J. Stroud in the development over the course of his rookie year, but specifically here in training camp where he's facing it a ton because he's not always with the first-team offensive line, and those early weeks in the NFL where there are some tough opponents, and there are some opponents that should be bringing some heat and some pressure and making it tough for C.J. Stroud. And really, rookie quarterbacks get that the entire year. So Bobby Slowik talked about it. It's one of the emphases. It's one of the big things, is what he said. It's one of the big things for him. So he's coaching that with C.J. Stroud, making sure that doesn't end up being a big issue for Stroud over the course of this 2023 rookie year. All right, appreciate you tuning in. We're wrapping up the video here. Would appreciate a subscribe and a like down below here on YouTube. Of course, check out all my writing on Houston football, www.houfootball.com. The subscription is free. You can sign up for free, and you'll get all the writing that I have on the site right now. There will always be something free for subscribers on the site. Of course, we will have some fun new elements to the site here in the coming weeks. Appreciate you tuning in. Can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.